Welcome back, folks, to WrestleRant, where I give my in-depth analysis of all the pay-per-views that I watch on the WWE Network. For the entire month of July, I'll be reviewing WWE installments of the Great American Bash event. Last week it was 2004. This week it's 2005, emanating from Buffalo, New York. Here we go. Kicking off the show for the WWE Tag Team Championships was MNM. Joey Mercury, Johnny Nitro, accompanied by Melina, the lovely Melina, defending the WWE Tag Team titles against the reuniting Legion of Doom. However, it wasn't the Legion of Doom that you remember. It wasn't Hawk and Animal, as Hawk had passed away in 2003, 2 years prior to this. So it was Animal teaming up with Heidenreich. Now, Heidenreich before this had a very notable feud with The Undertaker for a number of months. I think throughout the course of 2004, early 2005, was built as a monster on the SmackDown brand. So for him to go from that to this is pretty mind-boggling. I guess WWE lost their way with the character. Reminds me a lot of Vladimir Kozlov in 2008, going from a viable threat to The Undertaker's streak at WrestleMania and defeating Triple H and Jeff Hardy and many others, to going from that to teaming with Santino Marella and becoming a comedy act. And he was entertaining, and Heidenreich was very much in the same boat. But from what I've seen and heard, Heidenreich was never really the best in-ring worker. I guess his build fit the bill, so to speak, I guess, no pun intended, for the Legion of Doom stable. And Legion of Doom, I never really understood why they did the reunion at this point in 2005, but I guess it was due to the fact that the commentators mentioned this on commentary, that a Legion of Doom DVD was being released at the time in the WWE. So I guess the reuniting of Legion of Doom in WWE on the SmackDown brand was a good way of hyping up and plugging the DVD. So I understand that. And Animal didn't look all too bad. I mean, he was well past his prime, but he didn't wrestle too bad on the show, and Heidenreich did most of the in-ring work. Whether that's a good or bad thing remains to be seen. It's kind of debatable. And Heidenreich was never, like I said before, never the best in-ring worker. He served the purpose of a monster heel, of being an unstoppable force, but as a babyface, it was a bit strange. And he did some funny comedy with Michael Cole and the poetry and stuff like that, like the I'll rape you scene that he did with Michael Cole one time, the infamous scene. But this match wasn't all that bad. It was a lot better than I thought it would be. And why, like I said, why Heidenreich was the one to fill in the role for Hawk, I have no idea, but like I said, probably because of his size, and anyone else smaller than Heidenreich probably would have made sense. And it would have been nicer had Heidenreich dressed up in something similar to Animal. I mean, he had his regular trunks on. He didn't have anything special. He didn't have the LOD gear on. Maybe that was for the better, because he wasn't trying to replace Hawk. But it would have been better if they at least had matching attire or something along those lines, because on the show they look like two randomly paired wrestlers going for the tag team titles. That being said, though, it was a very nice story behind it, and them dedicating their title win to the late great Hawk. So that was very cool. The impromptu pairing of Heidenreich and Animal was a bit random, but they made it work. They didn't hold the tag team championships for all that long. They would only hold it for a few more weeks before dropping them back to M&M. But M&M, I thought, were a very underrated tag team, in my opinion. They had the hot manager, Melina. They had the skills. It launched the career of John Morrison, not to world championship to that level, not to that caliber, but it did grant him many runs of the Intercontinental and other tag team championships, including with The Miz. So it helped launch the career of Melina as well as John Morrison, a.k.a. Johnny Nitro, on this show. So a very good opener, a lot better than I thought it was. Fun tag team title match. Crowd pop big for the title change. The theme music probably could have been better. I know the case is on sometimes with the WWE Network is that the music is copyrighted and they have to fill it in with other music. And you can obviously tell when it's blurred over or censored over with other music. That wasn't the case for this show. They had the intro to the and it's WWE's theme song too, so it's not like they don't own the rights to the Legion of Doom entrance music. They have it, so there's no reason to blur it out. So I'm pretty sure, like I've said before, I wasn't a fan during this time, so I don't know. But they had the What a Rush intro to the theme song, but they had a completely different other theme song for everything after that. And that was a bit weird, because it brought back memories whenever you would hear the Legion of Doom theme song, and to have that generic rock music after this was a bit odd, but maybe it was Heidenreich's music at the time, I don't know. But anyway, a very good opener, really enjoyed that. Up next, we had Booker T versus Christian. Christian had just jumped ship from the Raw brand, had jump-started the feud with Booker T. I think maybe that week on SmackDown, or the week before, 2 weeks, whatever, Christian had defeated Booker after utilizing dirty tactics, setting up the rematch for this show. So there was real no feud behind this matchup. But for what it was, I enjoyed it. Both guys are great workers. They developed good chemistry throughout the match. The first portion of the match was kind of quiet. The fans didn't really care. Christian was over with the crowd, and I'll get to Christian in a minute. But the fans just didn't have any incentive to care about the match or the action itself because there was just no feud or story behind this. However, that being said, by the end of the match, the final few minutes were very, very well done. A lot of awesome finishing maneuvers and reversals and stuff like that. A lot of great stuff in the final few minutes. Booker T picked up the victory after Sharmell, not Queen Sharmell, that would come a year later. And I didn't even know that Sharmell was with Booker T at the time. And the crowd wasn't turning on him, but you could see that a heel turn was imminent. I don't know exactly when he turned heel, but I had no idea that Sharmell was with Booker T at this period in time. But anyway, Sharmell slapped Christian. Christian went to go after Sharmell at ringside, but before he could, met with the bookend out of nowhere, picks up the victory for Booker T. So I thought this was a very good match that exceeded expectations as well. But going back to Christian, it was only a month prior that the guy was headlining the Raw pay-per-view Vengeance, not main eventing, but headlining, for the WWE Championship with Jericho and John Cena. And I know one can argue that whole matchup was used to set up Jericho versus Cena for the summer feud. I understand that. But that being said, though, Christian was involved in that matchup. And they had a good reason to put him in that matchup. He was over. People liked him. He was a great heel. Arguably one of the best runs he had in the WWE was during the course of 2005. Didn't win many big matches, but he was involved in a lot of good feuds. Feuded with a lot of top stars. Christian, John Cena, Booker T, a lot of former world and future world champions. So I thought this was a really good matchup. Christian, a very underrated worker. Always has been, but especially during this period in time, that they didn't do more with him after being in a headlining matchup at Vengeance and then jumping ship to SmackDown and being in the second match on the card. And you would think that going from Raw to SmackDown would be a benefit, but they never really did much with Christian during his brief run on SmackDown before leaving the WWE later that year, and of course jumping ship to TNA, and the rest is history. But a very good match from Booker and Christian. Up next for the United States Championship, a great American Bash tradition, Orlando Jordan defending against Chris Benoit. I never really got the whole hype behind Orlando Jordan. I've been watching him for a few years now. I remember first being introduced to him back in like 2009 in the whole Cabinet stable. And the commentators referred to him as like the best pure athlete in the WWE. And maybe that's true. But nothing in this matchup or any of the matches I've seen with Orlando Jordan have impressed me to the point where I believe that. And maybe the guy's a great athlete. Maybe so. I haven't seen enough of his work. But based off what I saw in this matchup and in past matches with him against John Cena and others, I just never really saw him as a star. And he was a good mid-card act, but he's widely forgotten. I never see people bring him up. And why TNA even bothered to bring him in? Like, you remember on the first episode of TNA, when they first went live, January 4th, 2010, they brought in Ric Flair, they brought in Hulk Hogan, they brought in Jeff Hardy, they bring in all these top stars. And then there was Orlando Jordan, just out of nowhere, and that he didn't last long. He did some stuff in TNA. And I mean, he's of course a gay wrestler. He never revealed that when he was in the WWE. That was kind of like an open secret after he left WWE. And in TNA, he really exploited that. And there's nothing wrong with being gay, obviously. But the fact that they exploited it and they had him kissing guys on television, it just really made for really uncomfortable television during his time in TNA. He tag teamed with Eric Young for a little bit, and then he got released and he left the company. So his TNA run was a flop. But in WWE, and you take the two side by side, you would never know it's the same person. It looked very much different between his time in WWE and TNA. So and I'm not saying he's a bad athlete, but just based off the work that I've seen from him in this match against Benoit and other matches I've seen from him, I just never really saw the top star potential in Orlando Jordan. So why they picked him to be in the stable with JBL and the Bashams, I'll never know. And this matchup wasn't bad, but I felt like it was dragged on far too long than it needed to be. I felt like it was like a 20-minute match, and it was only 14. Went on a lot longer than it needed to, and it ended with Orlando Jordan retaining anyway. I thought I remember him winning via like DQ or something, but I guess not. And Benoit would go on to beat Jordan for like the title in like 10 seconds or something at SummerSlam the following month. So it was a good way of furthering the feud and making sure the title was still on Jordan. But the matchup felt a lot longer than it should have been. It went a lot longer than it needed to. So that being said, it wasn't a bad matchup, just very, very boring. There was really nothing exciting about this match at all. And Benoit was one of the best wrestlers in WWE at the time. Not even he could get a great matchup out of Jordan. And again, I'm not saying it's Jordan's fault. It's either the fact that these two don't have great chemistry or what. It's not that they weren't given the right amount of time, because they were given 14 minutes. It felt like an hour. I almost fell asleep watching this matchup. It was just nothing exciting about it. But moving on, Undertaker versus Muhammad Hassan in a number one contenders match for the World Heavyweight Championship. So a lot to talk about here. The whole thing going into this matchup was that Muhammad Hassan, on an episode of SmackDown in early July of 2005, after he jumped ship from Raw, and even before that, this guy was being shoved down the viewers' throats. Undefeated streak, was one of the most hated heels in the entire company, was getting legitimate hate from fans, hate mail, death threats, you name it, he got it. One of the best traditional hated heels in WWE in 2005, no doubt about it. The guy, I think, was being set up for a world championship run, and popular opinion, rumor is that he was going to go over on Undertaker on this show and go on to defeat Batista for the world championship at SummerSlam the following month. So, and I don't doubt that for a second, because WWE was so high on him. He had very good mic skills, and he's not even Arab. He's not even Indian or whatever. He's not even Indian at all. He's not Arab American or whatever they build him as. He's actually, I think, Italian, I think it was, because his last name is like Copani or something like that. He's like a full-blooded Italian, no traces of Arab American in his blood at all, and they still made people believe that he was. And he did a great job with the gimmick, Daivari by his side, a great character, and granted, I was like, holy shit, I looked up this guy after I saw this matchup, and he's only freaking 32. This guy was like 23, 24 during the course of this push. Not even. I was like, holy shit, they pushed him really, really soon. This guy was really young during the course of his push. But anyway, the thing with this feud was that on an episode of SmackDown, it was taped on Tuesday, aired on, I think, Friday or Thursday, whatever day SmackDown was airing on at the time, with Undertaker competing in a match against Daivari. Hassan said, and they recapped this entire thing in the video package, and I'll get into that in a minute, but which is weird, but they showed Undertaker getting beat up by terrorists, by people dressed up as terrorists, and there were white people underneath the terrorists. It wasn't like they're Indian or they were stereotyping or anything like that, but the terrorists attacking Undertaker created an uproar amongst the media, because that same day was the London bombings. So it was a terrible tragedy combined with the terrible timing of this angle, and it just created a lot of bad publicity for the WWE. Probably the most bad publicity that they had until the Benoit tragedy 2 years later. But anyway, though, it created a massive uproar. UPN was terribly down on the Hassan character, and they wanted not only them to tone it down, but for them to kick off the Hassan character off their programming for good. And they didn't want him on at all. So instead of appearing on SmackDown in the weeks leading up to the Bash, and they covered it well by saying the lawyers didn't want him on there, or whatever. He said he didn't want to appear on the show, whatever. He did a few interviews on WWE.com going into this. So here's the thing with this whole freaking angle, okay? So they get a shitload of bad publicity from this whole thing with the terrorists and all that shit. And so they go into this angle, they go into this matchup. Hassan, he makes his entrance first, cut a long-ass promo, getting a lot of good heat, and he comes out with the goddamn terrorists. So if WWE was so mad or felt bad about what they did with this angle, they still continue to carry it on anyway. It's not like they even try to downplay it. They hyped it up in the video package. They reminded viewers, if something like this happened today, 10 years later, and let's go, for example, the Daniel Bryan necktie violence incident from when the Nexus, hat reference, made their debut in June of 2010. Daniel Bryan spit in John Cena's face. He choked Justin Roberts, the ring announcer, with his own tie, and he got released a couple of days later because his actions were not PG enough. Okay, so in the replays of the Nexus attack, not only the following week, but forever from that point on, you would never see the next spot replayed ever again, ever. In the WWE Network, in the countdown specials, Raw flashbacks, anything. They would never show that moment again. So, and Daniel Bryan got released for it, and they never mentioned him or anything like that. I think the Nexus actually just said, Wade Barrett said that they exiled him from the group to explain his absence. But they never showed that again because they didn't want to continue to get bad publicity from the media. They don't want to remind viewers of the incident and bring it back up. Same thing with Benoit. After he did the whole tragedy back in 2007, they never mentioned him again, aside from like Mr. McMahon talking about an episode of ECW or something, of course, obviously. But since then, they haven't talked about him at all on the website, anything. WWE in 05, I guess, thought it was smart to replay it all, bring the fucking terrorists back out for another angle, and it was just so bizarre. If you want to move past it so badly, then why do you bring these guys back out and remind viewers of what happened? Just let it go, move on, pretend like it never happened. Some people get mad at that, but that's what you need to do as a company, as a business. That's what is, in Triple H's best slogan, best for business. That's what's best for business. You bury it under the rug and you just move forward without mentioning it ever again. That's not what WWE did with this angle. They brought up the terrorists. They brought it up again and again and again. They had all the heat put on Hassan, and this is his last promo that he ever cut. Why would you go through the trouble of putting so much heat on Hassan with this promo that you would have him cut this long promo if he was never going to be on TV again? It made no sense at all, especially given the fact that if this would have happened today, Hassan would come out, probably with no freaking entrance, would just show up in the ring, they'd get over the match within like 5 minutes, and they'd move on. They would do nothing else. They wouldn't have Hassan come out with the whole terrorist entrance. They wouldn't have him cut a long promo. They would pretend like it never happened, just to give people what they paid for on the pay-per-view, and move forward, and just move forward with their storylines, their program, forget it ever happened. WWE didn't do that on the show. It made no sense. The matchup was good while it lasted. It obviously ended prematurely. It wasn't what I just said. It wasn't like a 2-minute squash. But it definitely wasn't the match that it should have been. After the matchup, Undertaker takes out Daivari, all the terrorists at ringside, and proceeds to powerbomb Hassan through the stage. And what was an awesome visual, a great way to write off Hassan. It's not like he took a tombstone and they never saw him again. At least they wrote him off of storylines properly by having him take this insane, nasty bump, blood in the back of his head, looked disgustingly bad, in a good way, not in a bad way, obviously. And that was a great way to write him off TV, because that could legitimately take someone out. So it was a good way of writing him out of the programming, but I just never understand it. And they ended up releasing the guy a couple of months later in September, and UPN wanted them off their network, and I've never understood this, and maybe someone can help me out with this, but if UPN, the home of SmackDown at the time, wanted Hassan off their network, then why the fuck didn't they just take him over to Raw and do the character over there on the USA Network? Or I think they were on TNN or Spike or wherever the hell they were at the time. Why don't they just do it over there? You know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense to me. Maybe they just wanted to avoid the bad publicity altogether. And WWE has done that in the past. They wanted to avoid the bad publicity with Daniel Bryan back in 2010. They did the same thing with Emma this past week. And I don't think it was at all due to a work visa or anything like that. I did initially, but now we've learned otherwise. And they just wanted to avoid the bad publicity, so they got rid of her. They brought her back like an hour later, but that's besides the point. I digress. With Hassan, they just cut him loose 2 or 3 months later. And the guy's a great athlete, very, very young, a lot of untapped potential. He could still go today if he wanted to. I guess he retired from wrestling, did his first interview about the incident like 6 years after it happened, so he really laid low after a while after this, and now he's doing acting, I think, and teaching and stuff like that, and he's never been brought up on WWE TV again. I remember hearing his theme at one point, I think in like a network special or something like that, for the greatest villains on the Countdown special, but that was it. That was the only reference they've ever made to Hassan. That being said, though, I just don't understand why, if you didn't want to put him on USA or, use that scapegoat, then why not just repackage the guy altogether? It wasn't his fucking fault. It was Creative's fault for booking that scenario in the first place. And obviously, had the London bombings not happened, maybe that all wouldn't have gone down. But if he had such an upside, if you were really high on the guy and you really wanted to give him a chance, why not just repackage him completely? And granted, maybe it wouldn't have worked. Maybe people still would have seen him as Hassan, and he would never have changed in the eyes of the viewers. I understand that, but they never even attempted that. It's not like they repackaged him and then got rid of him because he had no star potential left, because people still saw him as Hassan. They would never have seen him as anything different. They just got rid of him without even trying. They didn't fucking repackage him or anything. It made no sense at all. And it wasn't even his fault. It's not even like he made a mistake. It was all the creative's fault for booking that horrendous offensive angle in the first place. and then just cutting the guy, and it wasn't even his fault. He was out of a job at 24 or whatever it was, or whatever age he was at the time. It was ridiculous. It made no sense at all. So that's my little rant on this on this match, and that's probably what this pay-per-view is most known for. And Undertaker didn't even end up getting a shot at the World Championship, because obviously at the end of this pay-per-view, Batista was still World Champion. They'd hold a rematch between JBL and Batista at SummerSlam. And maybe they held the World Championship match between Batista and Taker at some point between the Bash and SummerSlam. I have no idea. I have no idea how they explain that. And if they knew, because they wanted Hassan to win this match, obviously. So what they could have done was, if they knew that Hassan was going to lose, then why not just take off the stipulation? Just make this a regular match. Don't make it a number one contenders match, because I just can't recall any other time that Batista and Undertaker clashed before WrestleMania 23 in any sort of matchup, or in any singles matchup. I don't think they would have given away Batista versus Taker on SmackDown. Maybe they did. Maybe I'm wrong. I have no idea. But Undertaker became the number one contender after this, and I just can't recall him ever getting a title shot. So this entire match is a complete waste of time. They buried the Hassan character. They got rid of him, and that was their way of writing it off TV. But it's a shame they didn't do more with the character, because I thought it had potential. And it wasn't even his fault, and then he was out of a job by the end of the year. So that's bullshit by WWE. But moving on, we had another filler matchup between the Mexicools and the BWO. I just never really saw the humor or the appeal in BWO. Maybe I would have, or the Blue World Order. I'm sorry. That's what it's short for, BWO. Maybe I would have seen the appeal in BWO had I grown up on ECW. And I don't know, just after having seen them at One Night Stand 05 and 06, I just didn't find them funny. I see why some people would. But, and the Mexicools thing was dumb too, them coming out on tractors. How freaking racist is that? You have the whole Hassan bullshit, and you have the Mexicools coming out on tractors. That's dumb and offensive. But anyway, though, Blue World Order, I just never saw the appeal in them, so therefore I didn't really enjoy this matchup. I didn't hate it, but it just didn't do really anything for me personally. And a lot of people enjoyed the Blue World Order. It was one of the hottest acts that ECW had, from what I understand, but I just could never really get into it, to be honest with you. And I'm not just saying that as, I'm someone that grew up on, starting from 08 and forward, and I don't enjoy anything from ECW. That's not the case at all. I just don't like the Blue World Order. There's a lot of things that I enjoyed from the old ECW. Raven, Tommy Dreamer, even Shane Douglas's promo, The Sandman. I enjoy a lot of stuff from the old ECW. Just BWO just never really did anything for me. This was a pure comedy matchup, so that's what it was. And the Mexicools emerged victorious, so that's what it was. Moving forward, Rey Mysterio versus Eddie Guerrero in their long-running rivalry. This is their third pay-per-view match of the year. Eddie Guerrero threatened to reveal a secret of Rey Mysterio, which would eventually end up being that he was the real father of Dominic. And I don't really know what people's thoughts were on the feud. They had a lot of great matches, obviously, but the whole storyline with the custody of Dominic, and to me, I thought it was dumb. I thought it was really stupid, and they ruined what could have been a really great feud. And it was a great feud, don't get me wrong. But that whole thing just kind of hindered it for me. And the fact that Rey Mysterio won every single one of the matches on pay-per-view. He beat Eddie at WrestleMania, at Judgment Day, The Bash, this show, and SummerSlam. And I just found out that Guerrero ended up beating Mysterio on an episode of SmackDown in September in a steel cage match to end the feud. But that was the only match that Eddie won. The whole purpose of this feud and the video package leading up to this matchup was that Eddie could not beat Rey. And he lost again on this show. And then he lost again at SummerSlam. So I don't get what the whole point of dragging this feud on was. If the whole custody thing was dumb. But I won't complain, though, because this was a very good matchup, as only these two could put on. It was less about the action here than it was, at WrestleMania 21, which I also reviewed here on the channel. Go back and check that out, shameless plug. That match was more about the in-ring action, and probably could have been more. I said that in my review of the matchup. And this matchup was less about the in-ring action, but it was more about the story and the drama that they were trying to tell with Eddie and Mysterio. Mysterio pulling out the victory once again. And that was pretty much it. And then they just ended it there. It felt like there was supposed to be something more, like Eddie was going to attack, it was supposed to attack Rey, or they were going to reveal the secret there on that show. I don't know what they were going for, but it felt like there should have been something more. But I really enjoyed this matchup, a great matchup. They had a great series of matches. It just always bugged me that Rey Mysterio won every single one. And maybe they were trying to push him towards the top. I mean, it was, of course, less than a year later that he would win the World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania. So maybe they were trying to push Rey Mysterio as a top star, but winning every single match, or almost every match, I should say, in this feud is a bit ridiculous. But anyway, so that's what it was. That was what it was. Enjoyed the matchup. The result, maybe not so much, but it was a good feud, though. Definitely one of the highlights of 2005. Up next, Melina versus Tori Wilson in a bras and panties match. So, as a male, of course, I enjoyed this. It was what it was. And there's two different types of viewpoints to take, all these years later for people. I mean, there are people like myself that hilariously petition for another bras and panties match. For those that seriously petition for another bras and panties match, I don't understand it. First of all, we're never going to get one in the PG era, like the bikini contest and stuff like that, when they wrestle in their bikinis, the divas, that is. That's probably the closest that we'll ever get to PG-13 again when it comes to the divas. But it's just a big step backwards for like the women's division in the WWE. In terms of feminism and stuff like that, it's such a much more sensitive society than it was back then during the Attitude Era. And this was 2005. This was no Attitude Era. This was long past the Attitude Era, and they were still doing this kind of stuff. And I said this with the Sable and Tori Wilson in my review of that show, for that matchup. But it was just kind of a step backwards for feminism. You know what? For the WWE, or in the WWE at this time. And I'm appreciative of the fact they actually had stories at the time. And now, as I film this, we have more stories in the Divas division with AJ and Paige, with Naomi and Cameron, with Summer and Layla. And Summer and Layla kind of crossed the boundary a little bit at the Money in the Bank pay-per-view when they were talking about their looks and stuff like that, as opposed to, in-ring competition and shit like that. And they didn't take themselves too seriously, and that was kind of a step backwards too. But anyway, at least they had stories. I mean, none of them were all that great. I mean, who was on the cover of Playboy and the bras and panties match and stuff like that. I mean, there's a step backwards for feminism in WWE, but it was entertaining. It was entertaining as a male viewer, not as a wrestling fan. You know what I mean? As a wrestling fan, it was dumb. But as a male viewer, it was entertaining. It only lasted a couple minutes. It wasn't too bad. Candice Michelle is a referee. Can't complain about seeing any one of these women in their bras and panties, of course, for any male, that is, any straight male, that is. So that's what it was. It was what it was. It was a pretty fine matchup. Served its purpose of serving as a buffer match between Mysterio and Eddie, and the main event between JBL and Batista, with Melina going over. And not this matchup in particular, but Melina would become a mainstay in the Divas division for the next 6 years, winning a multitude of Divas and Women's Championships alike. And this was long before any of that ever happened. And she was still managing Eminem at the time and stuff like that. But she went from managing Eminem earlier on in the night to competing in her own singles matchup on SmackDown, or on the Great American Bash pay-per-view on this show. And I think it was her first singles matchup in WWE on pay-per-view. I think at the time. I'm not exactly sure. But it would kind of plant the seeds for a future singles run for Melina when she would eventually break off on her own in 06, 07. So moving on here to the main event for the World Heavyweight Championship, JBL versus Batista. Very solid match between these two. I've seen a number of matches between them. I saw their SummerSlam matchup, the No Holds Barred match. I've seen that a few times on Batista's DVD. I saw their most recent Bull Rope match from SmackDown on Batista's second DVD. So this, I think, was the first matchup they competed against one another. It was a very solid matchup. The fans were into it. It was entertaining the final few minutes. The finish kind of took a bit of the life out of it, with Batista getting himself disqualified. Usually that's not the case. And it's not like he took a chair and just got himself DQ'd because he wanted to retain the title. It was because JBL and Orlando Jordan, who interfered and was a part of the cabinet with JBL at the time, interfered and hit Batista, hit Batista with the chair first. So it's not like Batista was the first one to grab the chair, get himself DQ'd in heel fashion to retain his title. And why JBL would want to win via DQ when he could have gone on to win the World Championship, I don't understand that aspect of it. So the finish was a bit weak, and it set up a rematch. It set up the need for a rematch at SummerSlam, No Holds Barred. So it made sense in that aspect, and it wasn't really the blow off to the feud. It was just really kind of getting started. It was a solid matchup. The finish was weak, but that's what it was. Anyway, so overall, this was not the best pay-per-view I've seen of all the pay-per-views I've watched in the WWE Network, but I will say it was far better than the Great American Bash 2004, which was very mediocre and very boring to watch, since a lot of the people that were on that show sucked. Luther Reigns, Suzuki, whoever the hell they were trying to push that time, I can't remember who the third guy was. None of whom were on this show, obviously, so that kind of goes to show how Mordecai. Goes to show how WWE, their pushes ended up going to the wayside in the months following that event. But this show I enjoyed. Highlights, the opener exceeded expectations. I thought that was a fun matchup. I mean, it wasn't the best technical contest from a technical standpoint, but the finish with LOD, or the reformed LOD, with Animal and Heidenreich winning the tag team titles, got a good pop, cool moment for in remembrance of Hawk, who had just passed away a couple years prior. Booker and Christian, good matchup. Jordan and Benoit, just boring as all hell. Don't watch that. Undertaker Hassan, controversial. Controversial is the one word that comes to mind when describing this matchup and thinking about it. I wouldn't go back and watch the matchup. I mean, just to see Hassan be written off TV. The matchup was nothing special, obviously, but that was controversial and probably the biggest thing that people probably remember from this show. Mexicals versus BWO, pure comedy filler. Mysterio, Eddie, well wrestled, had a good story to it. Not a fan of the finish. And same thing with the main event. Melina versus Tori was just kind of a treat for the male viewers in remembrance, for just, celebrating the 4th of July, Great American Bash, blah, 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 blah. So that's what it was. Good show overall. Not a great show, but a good show. Like I said, highlights, main event was good, Mysterio Eddie was good, and Booker Christian was surprisingly, pleasantly surprising as well was the opener for the Tag Team Championships. Everything else I would skip. I wouldn't go back and watch this pay-per-view in its entirety. I would just go back and watch certain parts of it. I wouldn't watch the entire thing all over again. But like I said, it wasn't the best pay-per-view I've seen in the WWE Network. But in comparison to the year priors, the prior year's Great American Bash event, it was far better in that respect, in being a much bigger improvement with better matches, better action, and better competitors competing in the matches that won't eventually become afterthoughts for the most part. So, thanks for watching as always, folks. Always appreciate it. If you want me to review a pay-per-view, if you want to suggest a pay-per-view for me to review here on the channel, make sure to tweet me on Twitter at WrestleRant with your suggestion. Leave a comment down below. Find me on Facebook at Graham Jason Matthews. Bleacher Report, same thing. And of course, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll catch you guys next week with another review. I'm Graham Jason Matthews, and I'll catch you guys down the road.